Modern Day Debates. I'm Carissa, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. We are a nonpartisan channel that hosts debates on science, religion, and politics, and our purpose is to give everyone their fair shot to make their case on an equal playing field. In fact, if you love debates and this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button as we have many debates to come. For tonight's debate, the format is going to be as follows. We're going to have roughly 10-minute openings followed by 50 to 60 minutes of open discussion and roughly 30 minutes of question and answer. So if you have a question, feel free to fire it into the chat. Make sure to tag us at Modern Day Debate, and super chats are also an option. But they will go to the top of the list and be first priority. Also for tonight, we've put all of the links of the speakers into the description box below. So if you really like the speakers, you can just go down there and find more of that content. If you actually, we appreciate all of our guests being here, and we are going to just do a quick little introduction. We'll start off with let's see. Let's start off with Kay. Kay, what would they find by clicking your link in the description?
I'm probably most active on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel. I haven't been super great about uploading to it, but you can definitely find me on YouTube at KFellows, and I'm actually on that tag on all social media platforms.
Perfect. Wonderful. And then next, how about Nine Tails? What would they find by clicking your link?
Well, I'm Nine Tails. Basically, I'm hoping to be a video creator. So if you go to my YouTube channel, for now, you'll see some debates and the little tiny thing. But soon I'll be doing some video essays, some cute little funny things. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Perfect. How about you, Kelsey? What will they find by clicking your link?
Hi, everybody. My name's Kelsey Hazard, and I'm the founder and president of Secular Pro-Life. As that name suggests, we take a religiously neutral abortion. We see it as a life and
You know what? We are going to come back to you, Kelsey. I'm sorry for interrupting you. We're going to come back to you. It's cutting out just a little bit, so hopefully it'll get back on. We're going to go to Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah. What will they find at your link, and then we'll come right back to Kelsey.
Sure, it links to my YouTube channel. I'm a leftist streamer. I do stuff on Twitch. I cover politics. I cover crazy stuff like debunking conspiracy theories. I talk about religion, all sorts of stuff. It's lots of fun. Go check it out.
Perfect. And Kelsey, hopefully it's squared away now.
I am terribly sorry for the connectivity issues. I turned off my video in an attempt to resolve that, but it seems we're still having problems. So hopefully we can get through this. I'm not sure what the last was you heard me say, but you can follow Secular Pro-Life on Facebook. There's about 32,000 of us there, and we welcome people of every faith and none. So I encourage you to check that out.
Wonderful. All right. So first off, we are going to start with the affirmative opening speeches. Go ahead. Either Hannah or Nine Tails.
Okay.
Either one.
I'll go first. Hello. First, I would like to thank Hannah for doing this debate for me. Thank you to my opponents, Kate and Kelsey, for coming. Thank you to James for putting this together, and Carissa for moderating. Today, I would simply like to put forth my argument by pointing out that one cannot truly have libertarian views and be against abortion. One definition of libertarianism might be that they paradoxically believe that order can be achieved by limiting how government intervenes with things. I'm not here to attack that, but rather to put into question where that belief stems from. For most, it is probably a belief that a freer world is better. Except I believe that too, and that's why I'm exclusively pro-choice. This is because the alternative to abortion is a forced pregnancy for those who carry children. I would like to ask my opponents to explain the ethics of forcing someone to carry a child not just disprove that abortion is ethical, which in my opinion is difficult to do anyways. I can personally think of 25 different reasons a pregnancy can be unwanted by the childbearer, and those reasons can be divided into 4 or 5 subcategories depending on taste. Yet all of those reasons center around socioeconomic factors for the most part. Why? Because having a child is a commitment, and thus the longevity of the family is key. Assuming everyone here is against slavery, I'd like to posit something interesting. Is a better world for a child born into existence not a better world for us all? Is the best thing not to limit the conditions a child can be born into to the least to the best ones possible for everyone? I would and I'm just going to kind of break away from my script and point out that we all kind of would like to have the most preferable childhood. That's just everything we all want anyways. I would argue the only people who this is not a concern for are those not born into things like poverty, immature parenting, or abusive relationships, for example. With society being as complex as ever, I find it personally sad that we so easily dismiss these things as insignificant to favor over a mindless right to life. Having nuance and grace can only help here. And by acknowledging that no system or culture is diverse and conscientious enough to not force a child to be born into unideal conditions, then it should be up to the person. Then it shows how it should be up to the person carrying the child. I'd also like to comment on the idea that a baby born can only be a good thing. It's not. It's only good inherently if the pregnancy was wanted. When the pregnancy becomes unwanted, the relationship is no longer mutualistic, and the negative factors inherently outweigh the good of procreation because the fetus is now classifiable simply as a holobiont, and the relationship is more parasitic in favor of the fetus. The fetus, by chance, is the only living organisms we've ever assigned personhood to, despite it not having its own independent biome. That's kind of weird. Personhood is best described as a spectrum of qualifying features attributing to optimal personhood, which is most attributed to mature adulthood. By favoring the fetus's right to life, we are forgetting how we are prioritizing the right of autonomy to much more established persons who already have had moral worth to society. It's not a big deal that a supposed life won't get to fulfill its destiny. It was never reserved for them anyways. I hope in this debate I can show abortion is better for a freer world and that abortion can only be ethical with things being so complex. If you believe that freedom and agency should define how we live, then acknowledge abortion as ethical only makes sense in this regard. And the right of the mother to her agency and autonomy is only better for everybody. And that is my time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hannah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So morality is a complicated issue, and it's something that as humans we struggle with every day. There are a lot of gray areas that aren't necessarily black and white. And while it can be complicated, I believe there are certain moral truisms and understandings that can be found common amongst all people when you put things up against like thought experiments. Like, for instance, if you're a firefighter and you happen to find a fertility clinic burning down, and you go inside and you find a 5-year-old little girl there, and next to her you have a tank full of embryos ready for implantation, hundreds of them. If you're going to decide that an embryo is tantamount morally to a human life, then clearly the answer should be, okay, I'm going to save the tank first because it includes hundreds and hundreds of potential human life. But I would think that the majority of people put in this situation would probably choose to save the little girl instead. I think this speaks to the issue that most people understand, if not intrinsically, at least at some level, that there is a moral difference between the personhood of a living, breathing human being with not only sentience but sapience and a potential human being, for whatever that might mean. So if we're talking about the personhood of someone in the first place, I've noticed a lot of anti-choice people tend to choose what seem to be somewhat arbitrary points. I don't know if the people here are going to discuss any of these, but things like heartbeats, things like nerve development, things like that. And I think it muddies the issue and tries to make it one of science when really we're probably mostly talking about philosophical issues. Even the personhood argument aside, even if one were to agree that fetuses have the same moral right as a human being, no human being can force another person to give up their bodily autonomy in order to save their life. Imagine if you're in a car accident. Imagine it's even a car accident that you caused due to negligence, and the car accident damages someone's kidney. They go into renal failure. The cops cannot force you to give your kidney to that person because it is your fault that they have come under harm. Our bodily autonomy is something that as a society we respect in the highest regard. It's something that we all intrinsically understand. No one should be forced to change the material conditions of their body for the worse, or even just for inconvenience sake, just for someone else, whether that's a fully grown adult or a fetus. So I think these issues are complicated, and I by no means believe that my answer to this question is the definitive answer. But I'm fortunate enough that we live in a country where my opinion doesn't have to be the only opinion. If someone in this country believes that a fetus is a person, that's their right. That's fine. I don't think it's a moral black and white area, and if that's where they find themselves on that issue, that's great. But by the same token, they can't force that belief on other people. There are things that we all agree as a society are evil. Murder. But murder involves a victim that is a human being. And a fetus, philosophically speaking, there's no definitive answer. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion on this and seeing where you guys fall on this. So thank you.
All right, perfect. Before we hand it over to either Kelsey or Kay, whoever wants to go first, I would like to remind the chat and those who are commenting, who are watching it later, to keep attacks on the ideological level, not on the personal level. Let's keep everything polite and kind in the chat. Attack the ideas, not the person. All right, go ahead, either Kelsey or Kay, go for it.
I think I'll take it just in case my connection cuts out again. I don't know what is happening, and I did miss a little bit of what Hannah said, but thank you all for being here. This is my second time on Modern Day Debate, and I appreciate you having me back. I'm always happy to be part of a discussion that keeps religion out of it, and in my view, that's how public policy debates should be. I did see somebody on Twitter was bringing up the Bible before we even got started, but I am an atheist, so I will not be going down that particular rabbit hole. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. Obviously, the debate of right to life versus bodily autonomy is an important one, and we are going to have it. But before we do, I think it's important to acknowledge that this debate is miles removed from lived experience. People don't get abortions because they feel they've been invaded by an alien parasite and they must vindicate the integrity of their uterus. Like, that's obviously rhetoric, and that's not how normal people talk. And as for me, I will readily concede that the average abortion does not begin with somebody waking up and saying, you know, I think I'll dismember my unborn son or daughter today just to show how much I hate human rights. We know why people seek abortions. That research has been done. It's because the bills are piling up. It's because the college campus doesn't have daycare. It's because the last time somebody at the company had a baby, the boss found a pretext to fire her. It's because frequently their partners suck and aren't stepping up to the plate. It's because they're scared. And these are people who, if the timeline were shifted just a few months into the future, would never dream of solving those problems with violence, would never commit infanticide to promote her agency or the well-being of her family. But in our culture, because law teaches, abortion is considered an acceptable solution, or even the obvious solution, and that means choosing life can mean swimming upstream. I firmly believe that if we can address those root causes, if we can stop the abortion choices that aren't actually free choices, there wouldn't be enough left to keep the abortion centers profitable and in business. And everybody has a role to play. In my case, I happen to have a guest bedroom, so my primary contribution is housing. But if you can't open up your home, you can volunteer or donate money or promote pregnancy resources on social media or any number of other things to suit your abilities. And pro-lifers are making strides in this area, but we can't do it alone. We are obviously going to have strong disagreements tonight, but if you're willing to help tackle the root causes, you are not my enemy. And I wouldn't consider any of you my enemies anyway. We were having a lovely talk before the stream even began. So I'm very pleased to be here with all of you wonderful people. That said, I do take a stance firmly in favor of the humanity of the unborn child. And I think basing personhood on someone's worth to society is extremely dangerous. Over the years, I've heard a lot of criteria proposed for why those in the womb should not be considered part of humanity. And invariably, I have found that those criteria, if applied consistently, would also wind up excluding some population of born humans. Most often, newborns, infants, and people with serious disabilities. I don't deny that bodily autonomy is of value. Certainly in cases where it doesn't hurt anybody else, bodily autonomy is a no-brainer. Get that tattoo, smoke that joint, I don't care. But there are situations, and Hannah, you were talking about thought experiments. I don't think we actually need to resort to thought experiments because there is a real world scenario that comes pretty close to being analogous to pregnancy. And that's the situation of conjoined twins. When twins are conjoined, first of all, it is nobody's fault, which is important because I definitely don't belong to the she should have kept her legs closed school of thought. Pregnancy, conjoined twins, nobody's fault. But it is nevertheless the case that in most conjoined twins, one twin is stronger than the other, and the weaker is physically dependent upon the stronger twin. Doctors approach conjoined twins by trying to figure out in those particular medical circumstances whether the odds of survival are better with separation surgery or without, and they proceed accordingly, which I think is a pretty pro-life way to go about things. But the way we don't go about things is we don't say that the stronger twin can unilaterally declare, I'm getting this separation, my body, my choice, even if that means the twin is going to die. That's not how we go about that. And so I don't think that that is how we should go about abortion either.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you. Go ahead, Kay, if you want to do the last opening. Can you guys hear me?
I hear you. Kay, are you there?
I can hear you.
I think there might be a little bit of a lag. That's what I'm expecting. So I think just in maybe a few seconds. And then she's going to talk over me.
Yeah, sure. And I'll try to keep mine as brief as possible so that we can get into more of a conversation instead of just talking at each other. I'm not just a pro-life activist. I'm what they call a consistent life ethic activist. We can hear you.
In an unexpected twist, Kay is the one. Oh, no. Oh.
Are we good?
Now I hear you.
I think we might have lost Kelsey again.
No, I'm here.
Now I can't hear you, Carissa.
All right, sorry, I was muted. If you can hear this, just keep on talking over me, Kay. The lag is just catching up.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no.
All right. So I think
Oh.
she'll be logging in here. I think she realized there was a lag, so she's just going to come right back. In the meantime,
yeah,
one thing.
I actually am now in the middle of a horrible thunderstorm, so it won't shock me if I get kicked off too.
Oh, okay.
This could end up being pretty short. Congratulations, everyone. What a fantastic date.
Well, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some things I've also heard James talk about, some housekeeping things. We are looking for some chat moderators that are a little bit on the further right side. We have a lot of lefty chat moderators. So if you are a further right person who would be happy to be a chat moderator, please hit Modern Day Debate up and we can definitely talk. All right, perfect. Kay is back. You can go ahead for your opening statement.
All right, I will try to be as brief as possible so that we can get into the conversation. I am not just a pro-life activist. I'm what they call a consistent life ethic activist, which means I don't support any type of violence from one human being to the other. And it's not just inclusive of abortion. I think that of all of the horrible human rights violations that we see currently in our culture today, that abortion is probably one of the worst that I have ever seen. And just simply because believing in the humanity of a preborn human means that I see them as the most vulnerable, innocent, and defenseless of our species. They have no ability to speak for themselves. They have no ability to defend themselves. And that's why I became a pro-life activist in the first place. After seeing the humanity of preborn humans throughout my mom's pregnancies, I have 16 siblings altogether. I have seen many humans grow and develop. I've seen them unfortunately pass away before reaching the moment of birth. And I can speak very, very clearly to the humanity of a preborn human, even at the earliest stages of pregnancy. So that's why I became a pro-life activist to begin with, because I see these humans as the most innocent and the most defenseless and the most in need of grown adult human people that are living, breathing, walking around to come forward and be the voice that they don't have and defend their rights to their own life from the beginning of life, which I believe is conception. I don't believe in these kind of arbitrary different stages of life that even the pro-life movement puts out. You know, the fetus has a heartbeat, the fetus has, brain development, the fetus has this, the fetus has that, 20 weeks and it's wrong after 20 weeks. I am consistent life, pro-life for the whole life, conception to natural death. I don't support any type of violence, even to born adult human beings living, walking, breathing. I'm anti-war, I'm anti-death penalty. But I do believe that there is a very real conversation to be had about how we go about as a society, making our society and our culture more accepting to these women that are in these crisis pregnancies. I'm not just a consistent life ethic activist. I also label myself a feminist. I see the horrible things that these women are facing, these very, very harsh environments, the horrifying fear of unplanned pregnancy. I have gone through it myself and I know how terrifying it can be. And I can only imagine what some of these women go through that are in worse situations than I was. And so I do believe that there is a conversation to be had about what we can do as a culture and as a society and as individual human beings about what we can do to help these women and these girls that are in these situations to make it so that they don't feel the need to go and get abortions. But I don't think I take a firm stance against using violence against any other human being in order to relegate my circumstances or anybody else's circumstances, whether that be fear or whether it be any other type of hardship.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kay. So we'll go ahead into the open discussion.
Okay. Could I just ask my opponents? You're probably both against forced servitude, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that forced servitude for the person bearing the child is either A-okay or that it's unequivocal in this case?
I think it's. I mean, Kay, you're a mother, so you can probably speak to this better than I can. But I think it's a little insulting to compare parenthood to slavery.
Well, what's the alternative to not allowing them to have the abortion? You're basically telling them they have to dedicate their life to this unborn being.
I don't think that's accurate. I mean, we have adoption in this country. We have safe haven laws in this country where you can place a baby at a hospital with absolutely no questions asked. So what we're really talking about is, you know, now you're treating merely the state of being pregnant as if it were toiling in a cotton field.
Well, it probably would feel like that for somebody who doesn't want the abortion. So even if we have those adoptions and stuff, how do you account for those 9 months?
I also wanted to bring up, I know you mentioned that like the way that abortion is depicted in media sometimes isn't exactly accurate. And you mentioned something along the lines of people don't wake up and think, oh, there's this like parasite monster inside me and stuff. But like I've talked to women, my girlfriend also in particular, like she is horrified at the concept of becoming pregnant. Whereas this isn't the case for most women necessarily. There are plenty of women out there who do take the concept of becoming pregnant, going through 9 months of pregnancy and all the bodily changes, and view that as like horrific. So that is a factor here, that there are people who do not choose to have abortions necessarily for socioeconomic factors, although many of them do, but for the reason that they just don't want kids and don't want that to happen to their body. And I do think that is something that comes in when we're talking about like the autonomy argument.
So the scenarios I was discussing, I'm basing that on research from the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-choice source and would have all the incentive in the world to highlight people who are getting abortions because of fears about changes. And statistically, it's just not there. There's, you know, Kay and I am not, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Okay, so I think that what Kelsey was referring to is a study done by the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-choice outlet. So they're kind of biased in or pro-abortion leaning, and they have released studies that state that the majority of abortions are done for, you know, all kinds of reasons regarding socioeconomic issues, and fear of things like being kicked out of their current living situation, school, not being able to afford a child, so on and so forth. I think that's what she was getting at before she got cut off. Is she back?
And
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, this is so strange. All right, keep going without me. I'm sorry.
So I understand like the socioeconomic argument in saying that we should fix those issues, but isn't it seem like you should fix those issues before you start tackling trying to make it so people can't have abortions if they want? Because if you try and get that done first, then they're still facing the same socioeconomic issues that you're discussing. Like, you haven't solved that issue first. And it seems to me that it would even make sense to say, why don't we just focus on those issues? And abortion can still be something that someone can choose for themselves if that's something they want. But by fixing these social and economic factors, it will reduce abortions overall. And then it'll only leave the kind of people who just don't want kids for a variety of factors or don't want to go through a pregnancy.
So there's an amazing kind of like turn happening in the pro-life movement that's been happening over the last several years, to where there is a much broader focus on the social issues and kind of changing society to be more pro-life and be more supportive of women in unplanned pregnancies. We do have plenty of people that are working on a legal level, but we literally have thousands of activists and dozens of organizations that their primary focus is getting these women the resources and the help that they need. So if they don't want to have an abortion, and we do see that there's an overwhelming amount of women that have stated that they wouldn't have an abortion if they weren't in the situation that they are in, getting these women the resources that they need, the assistance that they need, not just throughout their pregnancy, but after birth and throughout childhood. We help parents that, not even are expecting, that already have kids and are just in need. We are seeing more of a focus, more of a shift towards that. I do believe that we are capable of doing both at the same time, kind of tackling it on a legal level while also making it a very, very strict focus on doing the groundwork in our society and in our culture, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, to make sure that these women have the resources that they need in order to not feel it necessary to even go through with an abortion.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just want to add to that. I agree with the idea that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I also think we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. To your question of what comes first, I think they have to be joint, because particularly when you and I'm not going to be able to summarize decades of pro-life feminist scholarship in such a short time frame, but the basic idea is that abortion is acting as a band-aid or a safety valve that actually prevents substantial progress on those root causes, right? So to take an example, you see, for instance, corporations coming out and saying, oh my gosh, Georgia is considering an abortion ban. We're going to boycott the state of Georgia if this goes through. Okay, what are the do you have paid parental leave at those corporations? No. You see what they're doing? They're relying on the availability of legal abortion as an excuse not to tackle the underlying root causes. The idea, it is happening, especially from these kind of corporate forces. It started as being a woman's choice, but now it's a woman's problem. So
I think you're confusing the order in which
responsibility onto her.
I think you're really confusing the order in which ways things are happening. Typically speaking, women weren't even in the workforce to begin with. So the fact that paid leave came about was after decades of fighting. And I doubt that you would see less fighting for that simply because abortion was around.
I mean, we in the United States don't have paid parental leave. Individual companies
but we do in Canada, and we have abortion. So I just don't understand how you can claim that paid parental leave is only happening because of abortion, or not happening because of abortion. My bad.
I'm saying we've got. Maybe what I'm talking about is specific to the United States.
Well, it just doesn't logically track.
It's definitely a pattern that we're seeing.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the U.S. has some of the worst parental leave laws in the entire world. But I think what Kelsey is more referencing, paid leave is just skimming the surface of what these issues are. If you look back, throughout history, you have our typical stereotype of the 1950s housewife. And then in the 60s, you saw what we call the sexual revolution. Whenever feminism we had a new wave of feminism. This is whenever conversations about abortion becoming legal on a national level started happening. It's because women were fed up with being shoved into a box and told that they needed to stay home and be in the kitchen and just serve their husbands. And they had every right to be irritated. They were being taken for granted. They weren't given equal representation. Yeah, we had won the right to vote, but we were still being treated as second-class citizens. We weren't expected to go into the workforce.
Could I just ask you a quick question based on that, though? If you think that it's a victory that women don't have to stay home and stuff like this, how is it suddenly good? Simply because we're saving a single life that we throw away these lives all the time. So it's not really that inherently moral to save these lives. How is it good to suddenly force that woman, or that person carrying the child, I should say, to stay home for 9 months?
Well, having gone through 2 pregnancies, I think that the majority of, unless you're doing manual labor, and even throughout the first several months of pregnancy until you get into the later 3rd trimester, you can still go to your job and do your job. I don't believe that women,
Okay, sorry. Whatever amount of time you can't do it for, but how do you justify that simply for a life that nature throws out all the time?
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Kay.
Go ahead, Kelsey. Go ahead.
Well, my question is going to end up taking us down another path. But I just have never understood this argument from miscarriage. You know, the idea that because natural deaths occur, that intentional deaths should also be fine. Like
It points out
that seems to me like it would justify killing people over 90.
I think part of it comes from a place of it seems hypocritical, because when people say things like, oh, life begins at conception and that's just a black and white fact, people don't treat like spontaneous miscarriages in the first 8 weeks like a baby dying most of the time. They don't.
In pro-life circles, they actually do.
It depends on the person.
I've never lost a born child. Like, both of my children are thankfully still alive and healthy, and I pray that I never have to experience that. But I did go through a miscarriage at about 5 or 6 weeks, and it was very emotionally traumatizing. And I think that another issue that stems from
I just point out that
we take humanity away from people that have suffered miscarriage. They're losing a life. They are, and it is.
Just point out, that your account for miscarriage being bad because of your anecdotal evidence, it doesn't actually account for women who don't want the pregnancy, so their miscarriage is a good thing. So the fact that the miscarriage can be bad doesn't make it inherently bad.
I would also say that even if as an individual you personally felt a great loss, and I have a lot of sympathy for you there, I'm sorry, but society as a whole does not consider it the same as a child dying. For instance, if we did, and we thought that someone losing a child in the first 6 weeks or so was tantamount to a child dying, then we would have manslaughter investigations every time it happens. Like, it's a natural fact of life, and it's a very sad fact of life, but it is one nonetheless.
I mean, natural deaths normally aren't investigated as manslaughter. This is another one of those concepts that I've heard before that I'm just very puzzled by. I mean, natural, if there's no reason to find a death suspicious, it's typically not investigated. And I really don't see what any of that has to do with whether somebody's a person or not.
Well, what's the smallest coffin you've ever seen? Because I've actually never personally seen one small enough to put an unborn fetus into.
I'm gonna say yikes on that one.
I'm just saying we don't honor them like the dead typically.
There are
no, I can acknowledge people do it.
Yeah.
Just one moment. Let's let Nine Tails finish their point, and then Kelsey, you can go ahead and respond.
Like, the way we value life is clearly not just this thing where we suddenly say, okay, this thing's a living being. We have to honor it now. We say, okay, this person was born into the world. Now we'll honor their death. But I don't think that just because a small subset of people do it out of dogmatic reasons, that's proof that the life is inherently valuable.
And I think that now we're at a point where the argument is circular, that we don't value unborn lives because we don't value unborn lives as a society. So that's not persuasive.
Because there's nothing to value.
To play devil's advocate, we keep saying, we don't see preborn humans the same as we see born humans. We don't feel their deaths the same way that we feel the deaths of born humans. We don't have the same amount of empathy for preborn human lives. Well, the same argument could be made for people that support war. You don't see people that support war. They're not shedding any tears over the innocents that are bombed, overseas, because they have no empathy for that life. This is why I personally am a consistent life ethic activist. I am zero tolerance for any violence between 2 or more humans at each other, because valuing human life cannot have exceptions.
Well, here's where I ask,
valuable or it's not.
Well, here's where I ask that you start being empathetic for the mother as well, because I think that she is the best person to determine the value of that life. It's going to have to be valuable for her to want to be a mother to it. I'm using gendered language. I'm really sorry for anybody who that affects, by the way. And so I really do think that you're just arbitrarily prioritizing a life over another for the simple dogmatic reason that you think one's more empathetic than the other.
See, here's the issue I have with that. I mean, you have spoken earlier in this debate about, you know, the idea that you're being forced into, or someone is being forced into raising a child for 18 years and that sort of thing.
Just so I can I just be super clear? If somebody doesn't want the pregnancy,
1 second. Let's
talking over one another.
Let's let Kelsey finish, and then if there's any clarification,
I just wanted to make sure. Okay, fine.
All right. Now I'm starting to lose my train of thought. That I really don't appreciate the interruptions. Yeah, if your argument is the person who is raising the child is most affected and therefore it should be that person's choice, then birth is an extremely arbitrary marker, because babies actually are a lot more work outside the womb. And you discounted the adoption idea earlier. So what you are arguing does seem to allow for death quite a bit later than birth.
So do women have the choice to flick a switch and just have the fetus grow outside of their bodies?
Okay, so now you're making a totally different argument about...
No, I'm not. I'm saying that women do not have the choice to not be pregnant. The abortion is their only way out of that. So to say that they can't have an abortion is to force them to carry that pregnancy.
I think the idea of... It's a little like saying if you ban theft, you're forcing someone to be poor.
No, it's not, because this is a holobiont. This is not just some outside thing that the person has choices to make over. This is a choice that's already made, whether they want it to be or not.
I'm not sure I follow that, but we can move on. Were there any other...
Well, I wanted to comment on Ninetales' question about, women going back into the workforce, because I want to be super clear that, like, when Kelsey and I talk about how abortion is kind of like a Band-Aid solution to women's problems, and I was kind of talking about, if you look through the history of women entering, the legalization of abortion on a nationwide scale here in America, and the progress of women entering the workforce, abortion was offered as a Band-Aid solution to a culture and a society and a workforce that was built for men, by men, that did not want to adapt to the fact that women can get pregnant. They did not want to adapt their workforce model so that women could be successful, while also acknowledging that pregnancy can happen, planned, unplanned, and this is a natural biological state that women exist in. So women took a Band-Aid solution that did not actually fix their problems. It gave them, you can kill your preborn children, and that'll make you equal to men.
So when you say, go ahead, Hannah.
I was just going to say, I think it's a bit of a jump to imply that the only reason that abortion was legalized and that the discussion was happening was because of women entering the workforce. I understand that the two are correlative because we're talking about women getting more autonomy in general in our society. But to say that, like, people were thinking this and saying, like, oh, well, how are we going to solve the fact that women can get pregnant? Oh, are we going to give them leave? No, let's just have the Supreme Court rule on this and have them allowed to get abortions. Because it's not even something that, like, solved issues. A ton of women who are in the workforce, like, still get pregnant and have the kid and go on maternity leave. Like, there are people who get abortion for socioeconomic reasons. I'm not discounting that. But at the end of the day, it's not all abortions. And women who get pregnant and have a job don't all get abortions anyway. So I don't think the two are as linked as you're implying.
No, not today, in today's society, because this is just how our culture is. But at the beginning of, you had World War II, where women were forced to go into the workforce and take the jobs that the men had vacated to go off to war. And then the war ended and women were expected to just go back into their roles. And you had the 1950s, where they tried so hard to push the traditional nuclear family. Women stayed home with the children, served their husbands, were expected, to have dinner on the table, kitchen cleaned, house all done up, looking pretty like Martha Stewart. And by the time the 1960s came and women were fighting to get back out into the workforce, and they had serious pushback on a societal level, and it was used as an excuse that it's easier to keep men in the workforce because what if a woman gets pregnant? And you did see a huge surge in pregnancy because of the sexual revolution. And corporations use that as an excuse to keep women out of the workforce all throughout the 60s. And you see the correlation, whether it's direct or indirect, of women trying to enter the workforce, being pushed back because of something they biologically could not change about themselves. You have the introduction of birth control, and you have the introduction of abortion as options for women so that they could go out into the workforce without the pushback from mainly male-dominated corporations and organizations that did not want to hire women. They wanted them at home.
I think it's a little confusing considering a lot of people in culture at the time were completely against things like contraception for women. Like, it was not like contraception for women came out and everyone was like, yay, people can take the pill now and go to work and not get pregnant. There was huge societal pushback, you know. You had to get like you had to make sure that you were like married half the time in some of these hospitals before you'd even be allowed to like be considered for birth control. Like, I don't know. I see Roe v. Wade and stuff like that as more part of the larger, like, second wave feminism of giving women more autonomy, not only over their bodies, but over their lives. So I think they happened at the same time, but I think to imply that it was some, like, concerted push to push abortion while simultaneously pushing for women in the workforce, I don't think they're related in the way that you're implying.
So I agree with a lot of what Kay has said, but I've been searching on my phone for this amazing quote, and I finally found it, and I think it sums up what we're trying to convey here, and it's from Graciela Olivares, who was a Latin American activist in 1972, which would have been the year before Roe v. Wade, and it's part of a long essay about this, but the pull quote is, "The poor cry out for justice, and we respond with legalized abortion." Quite frankly, abortion is cheaper, and that is, I think, what's driving a lot of this.
Like, abortion has existed all throughout human history, though. It's not specific to the socioeconomic realities of America from the 1960s and to today. Like, it's consistently happened in every human society. So to imply that it has some intrinsic connection is just strange to me. I understand that there are socioeconomic factors, but it's not the only factor. There are a myriad of reasons people choose to terminate their pregnancies.
So the evidence that it's gone on throughout history, I'm open to seeing more of it, but what I've seen so far is pretty weak, just because, you know, pre-modern societies really did not have the medical means to accomplish abortion. They simply used infanticide for the same purpose. It really wasn't until the advent of antibiotics that abortion became safe enough for the mother to be common.
I suppose if you're talking about safe medical abortions, sure, but they did exist somewhat in the past. They were just incredibly dangerous.